Here today for Gallery Watch at the Gombok Gallery for work by Robert Juniper. It's a celebration exhibition, amazing array of work, which is celebrating this iconic West Australian who has work around the world and is an important artist for Australia and Western Australia. Robert Juniper.
Absolute celebration exhibition for us. The family has a collection of my dad's work, and we've also borrowed some works that we don't own to add to the exhibition, because we wanted to show a body of Dad's work spanning a career of over 60 years, and you'll see in this exhibition one of his first paintings, which is Evening Walk, 1951, up until probably 2007, 2008.
As I said, it's really nice to see such a breadth from as I said, there's paintings there from the 50s sort of right through, and that's really lovely to see it all displayed. I guess in a lot of sort of exhibitions, I suppose it's a bit like a retrospective in that way, and I think retrospects are nice because you do get that sort of breadth of work displayed. So
it's a joyful explosion of work, and it I suppose illustrates quite a few different things about Dad's life and Dad's passions, and you'll see in here Dad's passion for fishing and Dad's passion for the Australian landscape, particularly the outback and the desert sort of landscapes.
Flying over the Midwest and that sort of thing definitely looks like Dad's paintings, because he had a lot of his landscape work is sort of from an aerial perspective. Flying over the landscape, you definitely see where he was coming from.
Robert Juniper was such a wonderful West Australian artist and landscape artist of the Australian and West Australian landscape in particular, and I think it's wonderful that so many of his works have been brought together in the one exhibition so that so many people can come and see this really important retrospective of his work.
Bob was very much centred in WA in his art, and also he's very central to our history, our cultural history from the 50s, late 40s onwards. And so the localness of it has been very important. People don't really understand that that's such an important sort of thing that we can all inherit that cultural history from the 50s, when these young artists like Bob first brought modernism to WA. I mean, Bob is very important. There's an early painting in the other room, which is the Last Supper, which you can see is it's quite simple and realistic in one way, but it's been abstracted with solid blocks of colour and broken up and so on, which is a young artist grappling with modernism, with the modern way of painting, of looking at things.
Well, I paint and I sculpt. I'm better known for making sculptures, but for the last 7 years or so I've been painting and exhibiting paintings.
As you work, do thoughts of your father come into your mind?
Well, naturally, yeah, of course. He is probably, if not the most celebrated, certainly one of the most celebrated artists that Western Australia has ever produced, and I feel very proud of him. I think the state does too. So I think it's marvellous to be able to put on a show like this posthumously.
Thank you so much for coming. I represent the Juniper family, which is myself. You'll see his influence by Paul Klee in a work called The Last Supper, which is in the room a couple of rooms over, which is about a 1958 painting, I think, and I remember that sort of style from when I was a child. You'll see quite a few prints. Dad really enjoyed producing works to be made into serigraph prints, and you'll see walls of those where the colours are just joyful and vibrant and almost leap off the walls. You'll see Dad's sense of humour and his irreverence. In Bluebird 2 is a slightly irreverent painting, and some of the other ones are too. Dad always liked to include visual jokes in his paintings, some of which we know and some of which were secret to him. But they're very evocative of his humour and his life and his loves. And so it's a joy for us to come in here and see all of these works hanging where they should be, and be able to enjoy them with other people. I hope you'll agree with me that the work just speaks for itself mostly. It speaks of his joy of life, of his love of fishing, his love of people, his love of dogs, his love of drawing and his incredible skill at drawing, painting, and all of the design work that he did. The influence of Paul Klee, and that you can see in The Last Supper, which is in the third room over there, which is just such a beautiful painting and evocative of those years. Several people have said to me that they can feel Bob here, and so can I. And that is one of the reasons that we were very keen to have this exhibition in this gallery with people who knew Bob's work, who knew him very well and knew how to exhibit the work. I think you'll agree that Ron and Terry have put an enormous amount of love and care into this exhibition, and I'm incredibly grateful to you for that. Thank you so much.
We had the exhibition planned, and we asked Bob, I said, do you want, because when you get a stroke, those sort of things come unannounced, it just sort of happens. And Bob did have a very strong work ethic. Bob always worked. So there was no problem about Bob continuing with the exhibition. Well, we weren't sure whether his ability to work with one hand, his left hand was sort of in the sling. Actually, in the book, it's actually a photograph of Bob working in my studio, what was actually originally a triple garage, where he was able to work from the wheelchair and also have his dog with him, and he lived with us for a while. Just because everything was on a ground level, so he had two wheelchairs, one to get in around the house and one for working wheelchair where he worked from. So so we asked Bob, said, do you want to postpone the exhibition? And he says, oh God, no. He said, we made a commitment, we've got to go through with this, because he said, otherwise what am I living for? Terry has been looking after Bob's practice following Mandy, and we have continued a really good relationship with Mandy and also with Bob right up to the time he was passed away. He used to still come here, although the management somehow shifted. But the work that you find in this gallery, most of it is pre-2004, and in all those decades that we represented Bob here, we had a wonderful relationship with Bob. Personally, I did a lot of work with Bob in sculpture and so on, with a mutual respect and understanding. Other than that, we miss you.
A couple more words. Thanks, Ron. A number of you have been with us on this journey. This exhibition is one step on a journey that's been somewhat challenging for the family, but also engaging in many ways. Many people have helped us on this journey. I will mention John Easter and Stephen Davies in particular, because without you, this would not be happening. I would really like now to propose a toast to Robert Juniper, wherever you are, presumably in that great studio in the sky. I hope you're happy. I hope you're having a good time. May you rest in peace, but may you live forever in these and other beautiful works that you made. To Robert Juniper. Thank you.
Welcome back to Gallery Watch. We're here at a celebration exhibition for Robert Juniper. The response has been amazing. Enjoy.
I did the first book about Bob. It's quite a long time ago now, and there's been another book since. Well, it wasn't really the first book, but it was the first book written by a West Australian, which is quite an important thing about culture. Bob was a part of a group of artists called that call themselves the Perth Group, and they were a very, very important development in WA. They didn't last very long, but the two artists out of that became famous were Bob and Guy Gray Smith, and of course they are the two most important painters really in West Australian art history.
Seeing all these works on the wall, maybe being at Gombok where Bob had a long relationship here, and he's not here, but his work is here, so it's emotional. Yeah, you can always feel an artist through their work. Oh, he'd love it. Yeah, always loved a good opening. So, and there's lots of people here, so that's really good. And I think he'd be really proud. I think he would enjoy looking through this work because it really is a breadth of his career. So there are some quite early works here through all his periods, and it's fascinating. I'm still fascinated by it as well. He's a very, very talented artist, and when you see a range of work like what we have on the walls here today, you can really see that clearly. And I think he'd be proud of himself, and rightly so.
Interesting upbringing. Quite bohemian, I suppose. It's always sort of interesting, surrounded by interesting people, artists, musicians, and so that was great. And just the personality Bob was sort of attracted those people. So yeah, it was a great upbringing, very, very adventurous. He sort of loved the outdoors, so we spent a lot of time in the bush and fishing, which is great. So I guess I look back on it as quite a sort of idealistic, ideal sort of upbringing, really.
Well, it was normal to us because he was our father, and he was the only father we knew or know. He was wonderful, and he was a great mentor to all of us. My brother and my sister are full-time artists, and my other brother and I both dabble. We grew up learning things at Dad's knee, and I was thinking this morning about even things like making jewellery out of pewter. When you carve something out of cuttlebone, and then you've gone down to the scrap metal yard and collected pewter to melt down, and then you break up an old clock to get the brass bits out, and you add it all together and you make some pendants for yourself. We were doing that as children, pre-teenage children. We painted, we drew. Dad was an art teacher, and he had lots of holidays, so we spent all of our school holidays with him, learning things at his knee, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. We were taken fishing, we had an idyllic life.
I'm sort of an environmental scientist and work in that field, and I suppose that the love of nature probably Bob had a part in instilling that in me, I guess. He is good. He was a great father. Very entertaining, always, not sort of jovial is the right word, but he's a very sort of happy bloke. I mean, God, he loved his life. He was doing something that he really loved doing. And so I guess that joie de vie sort of, he was, and very loving dad. But yeah, very happy sort of man. So, you can't ask for more than that in life, I suppose. So.
Bob always said that it seemed that he didn't do very many drawings, but it was his practice to do drawings and sometimes stick them to board and paint over them, so drawings were turned into paintings. So with as I said, the drawings here, the graphite work is pretty rare. There are some etchings, aquatints, serograph prints, so there's a great range of things here to see.
The work has been mostly in Dad's private collection until he died, and then the family has held it after that.
This is a mixture of works on consignment, works in the prints owned by us, his children, and paintings from his personal collection that we inherited. So yeah, it's nice to see such a broad range of things basically from 1950 up to the early noughties. So it's a big range of styles and influences.
It's a huge thing, but we've had marvellous help from the Gombok Gallery. They're very old friends of Dad's and of ours, and it's this beautiful gallery really showcases the work as it should be. Very few other galleries would have the capacity to have a show this size, and very few other galleries would have the capacity, would know Dad's work as well as the Gomboks do, and be able to match the pieces and put the pieces where they need to be and to show the pieces off at their best. So it's been yes, it's been work, but mostly it's been work for the Gomboks, and the family has been incredibly grateful for them and what they've put into the exhibition.
For me, it's enormous because it's a tribute exhibition, a celebration of his work. It's the first time all of his prints have been seen together in one place, and a fairly significant collection of his paintings too, so I think it's marvellous. But I suppose that once you start looking at the work as a whole, in a collective sense, it really speaks volumes about his prolific nature of his work and the many styles that he's embraced, and also the breadth of his artistic vision, you could say.
Well, I'm just walking through here, and it's an extraordinary collection of work, and it also has a very peaceful effect on me walking around here and seeing it, because I haven't seen a body of work of Robert's for years, and it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I think it's so great that Gombok Gallery have done this, because so many of them have seen his work over the years, but never a collection like this. So extraordinary, and when you look at some of them that have been sold, they are exceptional, and they're also affordable. I think there is a sophistication in his work at any rate, and I think that as one matures you see things in a different way completely, and you can see it in the work. Yeah.
And how do you think he sees the world?
Oh, I actually think he sees it in an extremely positive way, which is lovely, which comes through, otherwise you wouldn't get the peacefulness in the work. But I think it's very quirky as well. In many of his particular prints are very quirky. I think he is extremely iconic, but I think he could be more iconic. Yes, in the actual valuing of it, and to see it in... I mean, I know there's a lot of them in collections, which is great, but I think that it could be even more so if it was put out there, and particularly having them in foyers of big corporations and in hospitals and things like that. I think it tells you a lot about Australia, and therefore if you want to see things really in a way that you can relate to. I was just talking to people how his work you can actually relate to, and very often very contemporary work you actually can't relate to as well, but this work is very personal and also very acceptable.
I think Bob Juniper was really one of Western Australia's most outstanding and notable artists, and his evocation of the West Australian landscape, I think, is really meaningful to those of us who've lived all our lives in Western Australia in particular, in fact, and travelled right around the state, and seeing his representation of images from around Western Australia, and more widely to some extent, I think is really significant, and it's wonderful to see them all brought together here in this exhibition at the Gombok Gallery. Yes, Robert Juniper was my art teacher at Guildford Grammar School when I was in first year there back in 1968. I can't say he developed any wonderful creative skills in me in particular, but it was certainly a great experience being in his class. I went on to study science subjects, much more so in fact, but it's a great pleasure now, having been Arts Minister for 8 years in Western Australia, in fact, to have had some interaction with him and his family, and to see in more detail some of the wonderful works that he's produced over the years. I think he was pretty well established as a significant artist in Western Australia then. He was certainly on the way to becoming so, and it was not much longer, I think, that he left teaching in schools to become a full-time professional artist, but it was really quite notable, and a significant part of my memory at Guildford Grammar School that he was the art teacher there in my time at the school, and I was very honoured to be asked in my role as Minister for Culture and the Arts to speak at the memorial event that was held after his death in 2012.
Could you keep the costs down? Because we'd like to have it there, and if it's...
How would you describe his art?
I would describe his art as beautiful and highly eclectic. I would describe him as an artistic genius. I would say that because I'm his daughter, but I'm also one of his greatest fans, and I'm not alone in saying that. He was an artistic genius.
be really authentic, I should have had some old Emu Brewery brown beer bottles, because I'm quite sure that the river floor is littered with those. But to be aesthetic, I omitted that detail.
You've been watching Gallery Watch from the Gombok Gallery, a celebration exhibition for Robert Juniper. Thanks for your company. I'm Angela Albuquerque.